It's exciting to be here, and we've got a terrific group of people to talk about direct-to-consumer expertise informing precision medicine. So I'm going to start out by a quick thank you to the Faster Cures team for putting on this meeting before we forget who hosted us. So a quick round of applause to Kim and the whole team. I am the one who made the decision to switch up the format, and then I ceremoniously announced that I was moving on to go work at Deloitte. So I'm really excited to put on a terrific panel for you in payment back for this decision. But I appreciate the opportunity for this kind of meeting and conversation to come to a place like San Francisco and the West Coast and Silicon Valley. And I think this topic, in terms of being the opening topic, is very important because we are experiencing sea changes in many different industries. And so we've got some experts here today who are going to help unpack where those other sectors are going to be helpful. Will they be hurtful? Kind of what's the state of play? So I'm going to start. I've got a few intro slides, but I think I'll kind of weave those in along the way. Let me see if I can get that going. I was also told, don't steal the clicker, so I promise not to do that. Okay, recommended for you. So we're living in a digital age, but we also are in the birthplace of biotechnology, and I found these two slides, or these two photographs, sort of interesting to remind us that the field of biotechnology, precision medicine, genetics, sequencing the human genome, it's not that long ago that all of this happened. So I think it's also important to level set and remind ourselves that these things are happening faster than we realize, even if it seems like it's taking forever. So there's a lot of activity here in the sciences, and then, as we know, a lot of activity in terms of digital. So we're seeing this evolution, and I worked with a young person at Deloitte. There's many terrific young people at Deloitte, and I said to her, you won't know what some of these things are, but I'd like you to find a photograph of a fax machine. And she kind of turned her head to me, and I said, there were these big old mainframe computers and all sorts of things. And she was sort of chuckling, but I'm not sure she knew what I was talking about. So, look at this slide to kind of remember some of the things. I remember my first little tiny Apple computer. You could barely see the screen, so it was sort of a strange evolution. The beginning of Facebook. Now we take all these things for granted, both here and around the world. Basically, you cannot walk around on the street without all of us having our phone in our face. People are falling into open manhole covers. It's true. We've kind of lost control of ourselves in that respect. So mobile phones, we've watched this kind of transformation. Greg Simon, who used to run Faster Cures, talks about when he was given a phone at the White House, it was that kind of big, cumbersome thing. And he said no one on the street knew what it was, and he was so embarrassed by it that he would go stand in a phone booth to use it, because he said otherwise people were kind of looking at him in a strange way. Obviously, we've seen that transformed with the phones that we have today. And then in terms of everything being customized, this was also where I went to this young millennial who was helping from Deloitte and said, I'm sure that you're much more of an expert on this marketplace than I am. I witness it a little bit through my 15-year-old daughter's eyes. She gets her little beauty box once a month. But you can basically have anything you want personalized, from pet food and pet treats to consumer products to produce. Looks like vitamins here, clothing. We're going to hear about all of those different areas and how we might bring some of that kind of sensibility into health and medicine. And then, obviously, where does the rubber meet the road in terms of helping actual people? So this is actually a personal slide for me. That middle piece is my daughter's shot record. And anybody who's had their kids go to summer camp, they need a shot record. And you used to have to kind of carry it around in a little paper file, and then literally camps would say, can you fax it? Now they can have it digitally. On the right is my Kaiser. I'm a Kaiser patient, and so all of my information is in that, including appointment information, test results, et cetera. We still have a long way to go, though, and we were in a small session yesterday looking at how are we actually going to use all of this data in a rational way to help patients? So what does the future look like? I mean, this is perhaps not digital, but this idea of, are drones, is AI, all of it is going to completely disrupt everything. So I'm going to turn to you first, Eric. You are the head of the All of Us study at the National Institutes of Health. It's kind of a game changer, groundbreaking. You have had a career in industry doing disruption.
Here, yep.
You actually understand the patient journey yourself, and certainly you're doing this on behalf of patients. But take us on a quick pulse check of where are we today vis-a-vis the idea of these consumer analytics meeting the patient, meeting the research endeavor.
I mean, I think we're at a point where these things are starting to clash up with one another, but we don't really quite know what to do with it yet. I mean, in the All of Us research program, we're going to collect very different kinds of data types, and it's one of the things that will make it unique. I mean, it's certainly at scale of 1 million people, and particularly focusing on the diversity of people who have not been included in biomedical research before. But the other piece of this is the diversity of data types. And we have to admit still that for most of the consumer devices that we carry around with us, and this has been a particular passion of mine in my 25 years in Silicon Valley. I mean, we started doing tests with wearable devices and phones like 15, 16 years ago when I was at Intel. We had to go to Korea to get the first phones that had GPS in them. But we still don't know with these devices that we're carrying around, for the most part, which of the data types, and are they going to be consistent enough across manufacturing runs and standards and all of that, are going to be useful for research and or for clinical purposes and or for behavior change. We think there's enormous potential there, and the imagination starts to grow enormously, saying, hey, if you've got behavioral data that's from self-report, from bots looking at the purchases that you're making, and you decide whether or not you want to share that, plus conscious things that you're doing on apps, we think it can be game-changing to help understand what happens the 99.9% that we as patients are out in the world, not in a clinical environment. And then combining the biological data types, and we'll do whole genome sequencing and all of that. We're pulling all that together. But one of the things I think that's going to come out of this national resource that we create is being able to separate the wheat from the chaff of, okay, this stuff really works, and when you combine self-report about your EHR and your own experience, and you truly have a holistic longitudinal health record, which really none of us have still, even with the progress that's made with EHRs, then okay, what does that do for research? Can we accelerate health research and medical breakthroughs, which is our mission? And then, can we also decide what doesn't work, and let's not keep repeating that problem?
So I'll get back to you through the course of the conversation about what the All of Us cohort can teach the whole research system, what it's been teaching NIH, because I would imagine it hasn't been a completely smooth journey.
It's an adventure.
a Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, maybe?
It is.
So, Christine, talk to us about what you're doing at Evidation Health and what you see in terms of the pulse check of where are we in this journey.
Yeah, I think my perspective is a little bit different as a technologist. So I don't have a research background. I haven't been in healthcare very long compared to most folks in the room probably. But spent a lot of time at places like Microsoft Xbox looking at a lot of behavior data. Spent time at places with the telecommunications network doing mobile ad targeting based on lots of location data, call patterns and texting patterns, and things that sort of belie our everyday behaviors. And so Evidation was really started with the idea, can we use a lot of this data, correlate it with biological outcomes, and see some of the patterns that you're talking about in the 99% of the time that the system might not see the patient. And what can we learn from that? And I think Evidation has a lot of research published on our website. We're starting to learn some very interesting things. And so we had to build a different type of company. We had to build a company where we had deep healthcare expertise, molecular biology expertise, et cetera, along with people from Pinterest and Dropbox and people like me from Microsoft. In order to figure out what all this data really means. And I think one nugget that we've learned is, all the wearable devices probably don't have the right rigor in some way, clinical rigor, to diagnose people definitively. However, if you look at the relationships and the trends of the data, there's really incredible phenotyping data in there. There's really incredible things that you can use to not only screen people, but also to find moments of change where people are going to be open to being influenced for behavior change.
Excellent. So Kathy, I'd like to go to you next. Tell us a little bit about the work you're leading at the Kraft Precision Medicine Accelerator and what you're learning from the consumer marketplace.
Well, I'll backtrack just a little bit if that's okay, because it was a bit of a journey getting there. But so the passion for precision medicine and individualized care, I think that became very clear when I was at the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. And it was a different structure there because when you're working in one cancer, as opposed to the entire country, right, Eric, we could go really deep within our data set. So within the MMRF, we were able to launch our Compass initiative, which actually became the largest genomic data set in the world in cancer. And it was a $40 million initiative that we put into the public domain. Once we did that, it actually educated all of us that myeloma is not one disease, but it's 10 different types of diseases. So that meant every patient really needed to know what they had and how to treat it. And now as we move forward at the MMRF, we say that's been great. Compass has been wonderful. We've had 60 research abstracts submitted to ASH and ASCO, but at the end of the day, it's not necessarily answering the patient's questions or the community oncologist's question, which is, we've now had 10 drugs approved, how do we use them? So I think the passion for us, and I think the passion for me while I was at the MMRF, was to say the vision should be that we have a data set so robust that any person in the country or the world, say it's an African American man, 45 years of age, has myeloma, and a translocation of 414 could go into our data set and based off of data, actually see what everybody did before him, what those outcomes look like, and give him informed decision making of where he should go, what he should do, and put that journey together. So I was hugely passionate about that kind of vision of let's get to the patient and the community as opposed to stopping the data, within the academic community. And ironically, at the same time, Robert and Jonathan Kraft of the Patriots had given an endowment to Harvard Business School asking me to come up and work across all cancers. And that was the beauty of coming up there and taking what I knew at the MMRF, but all the beauty of what everybody else was doing and sharing it. And the first place we ended up working was direct to patient. So what happened in that situation was we brought in 5 cancer foundations, the best disease foundations working in precision medicine, and we brought in the consumer companies. So I think some of these were Harvard alums, but Rent the Runway, Birchbox, which is the one your daughter is using, Uber, and we actually had them train us as healthcare organizations on how we could get data better and how we could keep our community together, because this really is just a customer experience. We just have a patient experience instead of a customer experience. And by doing this for the last 9 months, they've taught us what we really need to know on, number one, create an emotive brand, stop talking about DNA and genomes because you're not going to get anybody to work with you that way. Secondly, make it super easy for everybody to sign up into your registry, because if you don't get that email, all the social you do will never get you that far. And the third was make sure you truly understand what a precision medicine journey looks like. It's not necessarily drug compliance. It's what do you do from the moment you get diagnosed to finding the right doctor, banking your tissue, knowing the genomic testing, and bringing all of those elements together. So together, they're now working with us and training us to do a full collective educational effort across cancers in the space of precision medicine. And I have to say, these have been phenomenal companies giving up their time just because when you call them and say, you know what we don't know, and you could help us cure cancer.
Well, and you said that when you've brought these groups together, they gently mock all of us because they have mastered the art of making 15-year-old girls like my daughter think she needs a new box of beauty products every month.
Absolutely.
So
it is really the way they do this. I mean, just to give you an example. Jen Hyman at Rent the Runway, they basically want so much emotion about the dress that you rented from them. It has to be so strong that you don't say, oh, it's a Oscar de la Renta or whatever. You say, it's a Rent the Runway dress, and it's the word of mouth. They have never advertised. Everything they do is social. And with Birchbox, they do the same thing. They know exactly what color your daughter's hair is. They know what, based off of data, what would look good on her, what might she like based off of all the other girls that look like her. And they just keep modifying that box a little bit and making you know that they took notice of the data. So I always say, if I have myeloma and I'm translocation of 414, I pray for the day that somebody will literally say to me, you know what, Kathy? This is the drug you should have started on. These are the 3 drugs you should have started on. When you relapse, this is what you should go to next if you have a transplant problem. And by the way, I would kill to have those Facebook ads coming my way and saying, guess what? A new trial opened. Guess what? There's testing going on a drug. I think people are just much more open and ready for this. And we have to put all the systems in place to really get it done in a thoughtful way.
So yesterday in this small session, Todd Shearer from Michael J. Fox said, we have a coalition of the willing in terms of those who are ready to roll forward. But Silas, tell us about the perspectives that you bring to the table in terms of making sure that we don't leave people behind, but also are there sort of undercurrents of issues that we need to be cognizant of as we race forward into this, brave new world that it's all going to be fantastic.
Yeah. It's how do you take everything that you guys are offering and distill it down in a culturally appropriate, linguistically specific way so that it can be adopted and adapted and glommed onto, right, by all of us, right? So I work in a space where we partner with healthcare, payer, provider, government, and academic stakeholders on one side, and underserved community-facing organizations, both secular and non, on the other, right? So you've got this group of, and those are the trust brokers in underserved communities, right? Those are the grass tops. A lot of conversation about, getting at grassroots, but you can't do it unless you really work through the grass tops, and those are the trust brokers. And it's not just always the pastor in the church per se, right? It's also the barber, the beautician, the neighbor, and folks who have been through some of the experiences that we're talking about today and can translate them in a way that community members that are underserved are inherently or can be untrusting because of historic factors. How do we translate those in a way so that they want to come forward and participate in all of us, and they want to participate in multiple melanoma research and clinical trials, right? But it takes some education, it takes some acknowledgement of Tuskegee and Guam and Puerto Rico and things that happened in the past. It takes some acknowledgement of that. It takes some PIs of color, right, that are integrated into the mix. It takes kneading them into the fold with those trust brokers and then delivering it to community members.
I mean, I'm struck by what Silas said because, we are significantly over-recruiting those who have been left behind in biomedical research. We quite frankly don't have enough science and data on a lot of communities to do the science and then drive those to cures. On the day we had the first immigration announcements coming out, many months ago, and people were protesting at airports. That happened to be the day we were starting to work with some of our federally qualified health centers who are helping us recruit many disenfranchised communities on the edge of the traditional and on the margins of the traditional healthcare system. And, they're like, oh my God, our job, the frontline staff who are from those communities are like, our jobs just got enormously hard. So I'm from Silicon Valley. I spent 25 years here. It's like whole genome sequencing saved my life after 23 years of cancer. But I feel nervous sharing my story because we're not there yet with the vast majority of cancers, let alone the other conditions that are there. So we need this community to figure out how to celebrate the excitement and the promise of precision medicine. But in the communities that we're trying to recruit, they don't know what precision medicine is. They have no idea what it's like to participate in research. And we do have an enormous trust barrier. In our strategy, we're going to leverage federally qualified health centers. We're starting to make awards to community partners from small churches to large not-for-profits. But I think we have to somehow balance the rapidity of breakthroughs that are occurring every day with the fact that the vast majority of the people are still walking into a clinic, if they even have access to a clinic, and are getting well-intentioned guesswork informing their care.
And to that point, when we actually brought these 5 cancers together, we actually did a patient journey with them. So it was, myeloma, it was prostate cancer, it was metastatic breast cancer, pancreatic, and lung. And we ended up doing a patient journey where we actually asked all the people that were aware of these, because there's a role of trusted third parties, whether it's all of us or how do you bring these people together and what roles do we play. And we had done this entire survey just on the MMRF side for myeloma, and it said whether you're newly diagnosed or relapsed, if you knew us and we had been educating you, you were twice as likely on every step of the journey you took to get it right.
Yeah.
And so that we then took as a market research tool, and we gave it to all 5 cancers because we didn't know if that was a myeloma thing or an all cancer thing. And it turned out the gaps that we saw in the education were very consistent across all cancers. The one that had a slightly different bend to it was lung, because in that situation, they already knew EGFR, ALK. So there were biomarkers, there were drugs, there was a lot of advertising going on. So the patients were, as soon as you know something's out there, it forces people to move toward it. If people don't know that they could be missing out on a drug or some success going on in their field, they may still sit back. And then the other piece we found was we brought in a group called IMS Health. And they did social listening across all the cancers, and they were literally able to map out for us, who were your highest influencers based off of years and years of just watching this social media. So you could say, well, this academic has, is the most respected in the space. And I think this is where you have to start to figure out myeloma skews older male African American. We were able to get a high number of African Americans encompassed by going to the right centers and working with those doctors. How we build this out from social media, you're right. We have to work with all these organizations to find out who are the influencers and how strong is social media in teaching us this. We don't really know that quite yet.
Well, and that's the thing
it
I want
starts
to be.
with awareness for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I want to be sure that we're talking about direct-to-consumer expertise in a broad definitional way. So you talked about in the prep call that we had, trusted brokers in terms of lightning rods for engagement. So do you think that we have the capacity across the different endeavors you're speaking about and the work represented in the room to have a broad definition that encompasses the, leader in the church? I'll let you.
I think it could be. So, I'll try and be brief. We're building a platform right now, ourhealthycommunity.com. It's a social network designed to provide hooks, culturally appropriate and specific hooks at the community level, right? So it's a platform designed to look like the community, feel like the community, speak like the community, to be adopted by the community, right? On one side, it lives there, and we will give it to them for free, and we will socially network folks together locally, regionally, and nationally, right? We then want to invite payer, provider, government, and academic stakeholders to the table to share knowledge around what the quote-unquote it is, right? And how to get engaged in the it. We know that African-American men are twice as likely to get multiple myeloma. They don't know it, right? So how can we attract them? There's a reason why a 1 square mile radius around Johns Hopkins in Cleveland Clinic, and I happen to live in Cleveland, has some of the worst health outcomes in the country, right? Because there's a bit of trust. And then for Christine, how do we gamify it in a way, because this is some of the work that Christine is doing, how do we gamify it so that how do we bolt learning management systems on so we strengthen those community organizations, one, and keep them part of the platform, maybe gamify it, and then further perhaps gamify it to actually get community members engaged?
Yeah, I think gamifying it is definitely a way to get things started and begin to build some trust with communities. And we found, for example, when people we run a consumer website called Achievement, and people who are part of Achievement, they get points for doing healthy activities. It looks like a toy, but really what it is a way for people to get familiar with the brand so that when we come with them with a research offer, participate in this research with us, they already trust the brand, they complete the studies to the tune of 90% because they already have that built-in trust. And I agree that education, awareness, all those things, trusted brokers are very important, but don't discount convenience. You talked about Birchbox and you talked about Rent the Runway, and the thing that's awesome about those services as a user of those services is Rent the Runway sends me that dress the day before the wedding. It comes UPS, you sign for it, you put it on, they send you everything is designed around this is as easy and lazy as possible for me. And when we think about research, it's like, what are we doing to make it as easy as possible for all of us to participate in?
And then what's the value? I mean, our number one strategic objective is to nurture relationships with 1 million or more participant partners from all walks of life for decades. And the only way I know how to build a relationship is deliver value back and forth. I mean, we're inviting participants to help shape what we're doing, not enough, and we'll do even more of that. I mean, we have, as of today, we have 10,000 people who have signed up in the beta phase, and 6,100 of those have gone through the entire version 1 protocol. And contrary to things you read in the press, everything is just fine with the All of Us research program. I keep reading these stories that people forward to me, and I'm like, really? That's really interesting. But the beta phase is going well, and we'll launch nationally in the spring. But the challenge of some of these things that we need to sort out, in addition to all the technical challenges of bringing all these data types in, are what are the ethics of using the kinds of things that make you want to continue to buy something to convince people to be part of research. I mean, we've got one of our IRB members here, and it's one of the conversations I've been having with the chair of IRB. I mean, yes, we want to reach out to people and speak to them in terms that they understand and invite them to participate in the research and to use the right message, the right medium, the right method. But at what point do we cross the line? And we've now done coercion, right? And these are real issues that we need to consider as we start to munge up these industries and say, okay, we're going to borrow the algorithms of Facebook and put them in a research context. But what does it really mean when we go do that?
So I want to pivot to what have we learned thus far? I'm starting to ask people as we get to the end of the year, what have you learned in 2017? So what do we know to be true already about this marketplace, the bodies of work that you guys are putting forward? And then let's move the conversation into what do we need to be thinking about and doing going forward?
Yeah, I would say what we've learned is that when there's value, the patient will do something about it. They just need to know that there's something that they will get out of it. So the discussion was if you are giving more than you're getting, you're not going to do it, right? But if you're getting more, you will. So we always have to say to the patients, the value of your data is good for you because you do need to know your subtype. You do need to know in the world of oncology, whether it's immune-based therapies or targeted therapies, one way or another, you probably want to know what's going on. But the value also comes back in the context of your data within everybody else's. So your data alone isn't going to answer the question if it's not being evaluated with everybody else's data. That's where the answers come out. I think the other piece that we've learned, what is a problem is, and this was a huge frustration for us at the MMRF, is we put $40 million into creating the largest genomic data set that has 60 abstracts. But at the end of the day, in order for us to get the crowd, everybody to rally around, what questions did we need to answer within that data set, and to beg other people to share their data sets in a federated model, because they were all using ours for research, we had to pay again and offer out research grants under crowd-based questions. We'll all vote on the questions that are most important to academia, to the community, and to the patient. And we had to put yet another fund called the Answer Fund out for everybody to come in and play. And as a trusted third party, sometimes it gets really frustrating that you keep doing all this work and funding all this work, and it's still, like you said, it's still taking too long. And it always makes me come back and say, what if the patient really had amazing control and you were able to build data sets and it looked, you're talking about looking like a game, it looked really pretty like 23andMe and all their gorgeous work, and you go in and it keeps answering the questions and telling you what to do, and you're smarter and wiser and your decisions are perfect. And it's out there, but I guess I just dream for that. And not to say that I'm not going to engage with the doctors. 85% of the carers at the community, I want them to be engaged with their doctor. And I'm not dissing academia because the research has to come from academia. But I think it's frustrating if it doesn't go all the way through and end with where the patient is.
But I like the way that you characterized what you've learned in terms of making the participation relevant for that patient. And the idea of you will learn something important about you that will benefit sort of the crowd. And I don't think that we have done that well enough across the board. So what have we learned? What did you learn in 2017 that's relevant to take us forward?
So I've got to piggyback on what Kathy said, right? We've learned quite a bit, right? We've learned that if you listen to patient consumers, they'll tell you what they want, and it's up to you to act on it, right? Because many times we hear what they want, but then we go back and do things exactly the way we've always done them. So nothing changes, right? I can't tell you how many tables I've been around where patient consumers are not at the table, right? But things are being decided for them, right? So we've got a small project we're doing in Cleveland with Metro Health, which is a large county hospital. And it's all around infant mortality awareness and improving infant mortality awareness. In Ohio, infant mortality rates they rival some third world countries, right? And African Americans in Ohio, babies die at 3 times the rate of white babies. In Cuyahoga County, where I live, it's 5.9%, so almost 6 times the rate as white babies. And so Metro said, here's a few dollars, do with it what you will, basically, just kind of help us across 5 zip codes. And so the first thing we did is we conducted a handful of focus groups, both community health workers and community members. And what we learned is that community members want to be reached with information through a couple different modalities. One is SMS, because they all have their cell phones in their hands all the time. So if you text infant to our short code, and we'll push this out shortly, but it's 30644, we'll begin to capture some data, right? Race, ethnicity, age, gender, zip code, right? And then we're taking a Case Western Reserve University clinically validated Healthy Moms Health Risk Assessment. We tore it apart because nobody wants to answer 20 questions in a row, and right? And we'll deliver message, and then we'll ask a question via SMS in week 1 through week 20. And we will take that data back and we'll shove it back at Case and we'll see what we get out of it. Lastly, they said, well, not just SMS, we also want to be reached with social media. So we've created this social media wraparound and we've branded it POB Movement, Protect Our Babies Movement. And we're pushing it out through Facebook and Instagram and lastly, through Facebook Messenger, because we haven't learned this yet, but we're doing this. Through Facebook Messenger, we created an ad. And when you like the ad, we'll ask you to join the movement, and we'll deliver that exact same clinically validated Healthy Moms HRA, only we'll do it through Facebook Messenger, right? So let's see what happens. But we're learning that we got to listen and we got to do what they're asking us to do in ways that support all stakeholders.
And what I like about the way that you just presented that is that you have this very targeted approach for a very specific problem. And I do think that across the board, we get a bit overwhelmed with the entire challenge and feel like our little step forward isn't enough. And so I like taking that and then multiplying it with other solutions as well. So tell us about what you learned in 2017 and how that is valuable to this equation.
We've learned a lot. We've done a lot of experiments, I'll call it. But when you can recruit 1,000 people into a sleep study in a handful of hours, it means there's a real thirst for lots of folks to participate in research. We just aren't doing a great job of finding them and meeting them where they are, to Silas's point, really. And then I think the second thing that we've learned is when you ask people about their own hypotheses, about their own research questions, about their own human health, you're going to get a richness of feedback and an overwhelming volume of feedback. That's incredible. I mean, we were shocked by it, honestly. It feels like lightning in a bottle, where people are asking questions about their own human health based on the new tools they have available to them, like Dr. Google, and the new tools they have available to them, like the watches they're wearing and the data that they're seeing about their heart rate and correlating it on their own. And these aren't just quantified self people. These are folks who are just sort of like looking at their gear every once in a while during the day and going, oh, I had a stressful conversation with my boss. I had a stressful conversation with, my loved one or whatever. And just sort of mentally
it's time for your boss to take a medication.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Maybe they need to get some steps in.
Yes, next on the board is
yeah, you don't need to take the pill. Just give it out to the boss.
Emails, right, to your boss that come from an anonymous email address. But those are the things that we're learning is participation. There's just a thirst and a hunger for it if we're asking the right way in the right channels and really meeting people where they are.
And we've learned a lot about the variety of motives that people have to want to participate in the research. And then now the key is how do we start to use these technologies in these ways to speak to those, what motivates them to want to give back or to donate. I've personally learned, I've been a Fed now for 16 months, coming from 25 years in Silicon Valley. I have learned that you can teach an old dog new tricks. I think federal workers are maligned and beaten up and treated as lazy, and it's the exact opposite of what I've experienced. We live in a morass of legislation that's never undone. We add new things, and it requires us by law to navigate lots of things. So if we would take away some of the old things for the new things, you would have people working much faster and much more efficiently. But we are slowly but surely teaching, our team and NIH how to do user-centered design platform development processes. That's what I'm bringing, and that's what we're learning. And folks are hungry for it. They're not resistant to it. We are learning how to actually, build these networks of health provider organizations and make sure that, yes, you can send EHR data in an OMOP standard, even though you didn't think that you could, including some of the FQHCs that we're working with. So, I'm hopeful. I mean, we've just been laying the infrastructure. We've built the call center. We've built the, we have over 78 of the 120 sites ready and up and piloting and doing all those pieces. And we're learning that people are very hungry for us to launch and go national, because there's a lot of people eager to be a part of this. But I just keep saying, we'll launch when ready and right. We're doing all of our security testing at scale and all of that. So, I've learned that you can do things really quickly. People at NIH tell me, my gosh, you guys kicked off with the first awards July 6th, 7th, and 8th last year. And, you've got 10,000 people coming through the full end-to-end infrastructure and all of that. So I came into government with a lot of skepticism, and it's like, you won't be able to do these things. And I think people's passions to have faster cures are driving great behaviors in government and academia and with our industry partners. And we're aligned, and we're gonna launch in the spring and learn how to do this. Probably the thing that we've learned the most is the potential of our direct volunteer network. With our partners like Walgreens and Quest and EMSI and others, we have the potential to reach where 95% of every person in the country lives, so that we can take the research capacity to them and not make them be the ones that have to travel to an academic medical center. We can't afford to turn on all of that capacity at once, but this is pretty game-changing stuff. When we work the kinks out of the system, we've suddenly got an ability to distribute research and get reliable blood draws and other kinds of things from people's homes without having to make them travel. I think that's going to open up who can participate in research. And I think we all ought to be thinking about that distribution of research capacity, not just digitally, but in person, so that we can actually collect the pulse of what's happening with everybody, all of us, in real time, in the real world, as opposed to these slow studies that we wait for to travel to somewhere else.
And there's the question of who's the keeper of the names. So there's so many disease groups out there, whether it's Alzheimer's or Michael J. Fox does great work at Parkinson's. We all are these trusted third parties, right? And so I always thought that as disease foundations, we were collecting tons and tons of names, we were keeping them safe, we were coding them effectively. And that way, when people came into our networks, we could walk them through the journey and literally get them to the point of, do you know the right doctor? Do you know the right diagnostics? Do you know the standard of care? Or do you want to get into a clinical trial? And will you share your data? But it turns out that a lot of times just best practices aren't there. So, what we found, and this wasn't, it's just everybody's a different mission. So some, organizations are funders. So all they do is they collect lots of information, but not patient names, and then they fund research, and that's great. But we literally spent 3 months doing a full landscape of all the foundations out there, trying to understand what they did, and they either they fund, they market, or they do all three, and trying to put that together and then sit down and work with different organizations and say, who has the best of what? Because I don't know the role of trusted third parties. All I know is that if all the names are held at academic centers and their information is there, we may never get that. We may never get that. So if we're trying to create a movement, and an example that comes up with us all the time is if you were trying to create a major master protocol across multiple drugs, multiple companies, and actually try to do it more efficiently, multiple arms on targeted therapies or immune, you can't, it's really hard to accrue. So then who owns the accrual process of getting things like that done? Are you going to rely on the academic centers when they have their own trials to accrue? Or is it us? So I struggle with that whole piece that, all of us is kind of a trusted third party. Disease foundations are a trusted third party. Where does it all start to come together? And by the way, we all know we're doing things, we keep doing the same things and we're not that efficient. So the 5 cancers we're working with right now, there's so much we could have been doing together, and shame on us that we weren't. But when you're running an organization and you're raising the money and getting the operating done, you don't have a lot of time to reach out and say, can we do this together?
Well, let's talk about this whole idea of the trusted third party, because it is relevant in terms of the consumer marketplace. You talked about the simplicity of having a dress arrive and having it just be easy, no pressure, just get the job done. And I think all of us are looking for those hacks in our life. Right. So is the definition of the trusted third party evolving? Mm-hmm. And how might we collectively push that forward? I mean, where are the touch points? I wonder, Eric, if you want to start, when you're doing the All of Us work, does the NIH matter to the equation? I mean, what's the name brand recognition of the NIH? Or are you guys sort of not talking about that because you're talking about this is the purpose of what we're trying to get done here?
I think the balance that we're trying to have is develop a brand around that national study, the All of Us research program. But at the end of the day, all healthcare is local, and I'm trying to make it so that all healthcare research can be local. That's back to that distributing capacity locally. We know, and I've learned this from others who were Kathy Hudson and others who are at NIH. They know, and we know that the NIH brand resonates with a lot of audiences, but it's completely unknown by a lot of others. What I think the challenge is going to be, and we're already facing it, is, I think we'll end up doing more than 1 million people, but even if we did, we're not going to have enough people with very rare diseases in our cohort to advance those. I'm already kind of thinking of a franchise model where it's like, hey, you can use our infrastructure at cost, and we'll share protocols, and we'll share AI learnings about how to compare across these disparate data sets. And we're already having conversations with most of the other large cohorts, both private and government funded in lots of other countries, to start doing that. But I do think there is this meta trust, issue that Kathy's getting at, right? It's like, who's going to be the trusted advisor across our data set, at least, is going to be more open than almost any of our partners that we actually work with, right, including a lot of the academics. So we want to drive that openness, but openness is one thing. Comparability and usability of an N equals 50 million or an N equals 7 billion people on the whole planet. We're trying to design some of those scale problems, and the things that we're going to try to do make sure that scale up well beyond 1 million people. But at the end of the day, I think the real question is going to be, who's the trusted breaker across all of our data sets so that we have an N large enough to really answer some of the specific individualized medicine questions?
Silas, Christine, who's the trusted third party?
So we're trying to build kind of the front end piece for some of this back end stuff, right? We've got a relationship with the AME Church, and the AME Church is the largest mainline historically black denomination in the country, maybe the world, right? 2,000 congregations, 2 million people. And so we've built a platform for them, amechealth.org, as kind of that front end solution that could be the third party trust broker, but it's got to be bolstered and powered on the back end with the right kind of technology. As we move, because we aim to work both secularly and non-secularly, as we begin to stand up ourhealthycommunity.com, it's the same sort of thing. It's wanting to work across trust brokers and communities, but we've got to have that robust, kind of back-end piece to help capture and share data.
By the way, that architecture is a nightmare, Margaret, because when you're sitting there and you say, I want to do what a consumer-facing company is doing, you have to have that direct interface to the consumer. You have to have a place for them to immediately put their data in. That data then has to flow, whether it's an email or as deep as a genome, along with all the immune data. It's got to go back out in a very aggregated way that can go back and be given back to that consumer and the doctor to figure it out. We have literally spent 18 months just interviewing companies that would all be part of that architecture with us at the MMRF. It has been the biggest time sink, and everything you think you've got it, there's another new company that comes in. So I would say the number one phone call we get from people at the MMRF now is, who are you using? Yeah. And it's a big issue, and we're probably all doing the same thing at the same time because we don't know how to put that architecture together. It is critically important. And then on the partner side, if you have all the data, you're still trying to figure out who do you want to use to do the machine learning to answer what questions so you can get more data back out to the patient again.
I mean, I do really kind of wonder if we're going to need the moral equivalent of a good housekeeping seal of approval or consumer reports. That's a logo that all of us do to show a certain around certification of we're all committed to giving data back, we're all committing to securing data and de-identifying it, and we're all committed to making it open, and we're working to make it shareable and easy of use across all of those. So it may be something like that has to get created that is stitching all these things together with a trusted brand, so that it's the Better Business Bureau of shared data sets or something like
Christine,
that.
do you see that happening?
This is a conference unto itself. Like to tackle it on
Yeah.
the 5 minutes left of the panel is not easy. I have both optimism and cynicism about this, and very passionate about both sides of optimism and cynicism about this. My cynicism is we live in a time of unprecedented distrust of every institution on earth right now.
Yeah.
And so to get folks to give data to the NIH, there's a subsection of folks who will do that all day long. There's a subsection of folks who are like, oh my God, never over my dead body, literally. And so that undercurrent is playing, but at the same time, we also live in an era where technology is going to, and I hate to be sort of the technology evangelist here, but technology is going to allow consumers to be able to store their data, even if they don't know what they're doing, honestly, to store their data, encrypt it, and be able to share it to other people through lots of different protocols that are starting to open up. And I'm not going to use all the buzzwords about blockchain and crypto. That's not it. But there are going to be tools to make it very easy for consumers to be able to sort of let their data go to places that they trust, where people are transparent about what you're doing with it, and transparent about where it's going after you, and transparent about the limits of the use on it, right? And it's not that hard to go back and ask for permission, by the way. It won't be that hard. But how many people use Facebook? How many people use Google? All your data are there. Do you actually trust those companies? Yeah, so trust is sort of like this thing we talk about constantly, but is it really the thing, right? I think trust is the thing if I'm going to inject myself with a drug that's experimental, for sure, and I think doctors probably own that space. For sharing data, I think we should have a slightly different conversation about trust. But.
So, all right, lightning round, magic wand time. Thank you, Kathy Hudson, for the idea. I did not go to Target to get a real wand, so please use your imaginations. Eric, magic wand time. I'm going to hand this over to you. You have to hold it and wave it to the audience.
Okay,
and
all right. Here we go.
Do a chant. Do your best Harry Potter thing. So tell us collectively in this audience and beyond, the social media crowd, what do you want to see the sort of this community do to propel this issue forward? What problems can we help tackle?
One, help engage communities that are not the same old communities that already know what we're talking about to understand the power of precision health. I prefer that phrase over precision medicine. We have to do a national awareness campaign, not just for our national study, but in general. If we're going to get people to buy in to the future that we think has so much promise, we've got some serious awareness and education to do, and especially those left behind. Two, I think, is start sharing engagement methods that work, digitally or non-digitally, and especially for diverse communities. One of the things we learned in 2017 was the complete dearth and lack of real literature and real sharing of things that scale. People will show us things that say, yeah, we got some African-American, urban teenage, guys to sort of participate in research, and you sort of look at it and it's like, oh, that doesn't scale beyond a cohort of 40 people, right? So how do we do engagement at scale with diverse communities, and how do we get much more sharing of those kinds of things? And then the third thing, in a very sort of self-serving kind of way, we're going to do a March 21st to 23rd research priorities workshop for our programs. We're inviting advocacy groups and scientists from all the different areas, and it'll all be open online before on a platform where people can share ideas. We need use cases. Pretend that this 1 million-person diverse cohort program was just to accelerate the science and the breakthroughs in your particular area. What research questions would you want to ask of it? What kind of data types would you need to capture for it? Are there specific ways you would need to capture that data to be useful? The more of this is a requirements gathering exercise for those of you in Silicon Valley. And we haven't really done this at this level at NIH. The IC directors, the Institute and Center directors are excited about it. This will help not only lay out our 10-year roadmap with specificity, but it will also help people see not just the sort of broad strokes of research we should be doing, but some of the key points where, my gosh, we don't have methods to collect that type of data, but if we did, it would have multi-field impact in that regard. And then my fourth thing is, when we launch in April, and you'll hear lots of press about it, sign up. But more importantly than you signing up, those of you living in the bubble of Silicon Valley or in the precision medicine space, choose somebody who knows nothing about it, teach them about it, and encourage them to learn more by going to joinallofus.org. So there's my advertisement.
Excellent. All right, pass your
the
wand
wand.
on.
Okay, I'll make mine fast. Mine's easy.
I like it. You're holding the wand like it is.
Yeah, you can control time.
You and you get a room together. Technologists and researchers and healthcare folks who are on the front lines get in a room together, hug, kumbaya, have a lot of humility on both sides, and solve these problems together.
Nice. All right. Magic wand.
So let's see, maybe there's two. Concerned about an exacerbation of health disparities because of technology, right? So would love to see folks in this part of the world, part of the country, think about ideating and innovating tools, trackers, devices, and applications and marketing them to diverse populations, because that's part of the hooks I talked about earlier. And secondly, with everything that we're hearing in the news these days about sexual harassment and how systemic it is and has been, right? We also look at racism and how systemic it has been and it is, and what's it doing to the health of our community and our country as our country becomes more black and brown. So I'd love for us to look at those things.
Very important.
With my magic wand, I would like to get.
Are you going shopping? Are you going to buy lots of dresses? No.
No, I would like to get a phone call from Gates, Zuckerberg, Benioff, Milken, Robert Kraft.
Mike just sheepishly looked up like, I'm here.
And I would like for them to spend some time with what is viewed as some of the best models and approaches out there that are going on in technology, potentially across diseases, so that we don't continually pay the dumb tax. Because I know for a fact that we've done so much wrong in the last 20 years that I was running the MMRF, and I know for a fact, what I'm watching at Harvard is best of intent. We're trying to learn. But the truth is, when philanthropy comes in, it changes everything. I'm blown away, whether you like the Patriots or you don't like the Patriots. Robert Kraft was brilliant in giving a $20 million endowment to a business school for precision medicine. And the most important thing of what he did was he said, I'm not doing this unless you work across all cancers. So here I was, the person who was saying academics don't play together and they should be nice. And here I was in a cancer with the best of intent, only doing one cancer, and many people saying, it's nice that she's figured out myeloma, but how about pancreatic or glioblastoma? And with one endowment, we are now all working together, not just in direct-to-patient, we're working together in direct-to-patient, our data structures, new advanced clinical trials with FDA, and new venture models. And at any one time, we're working with 10 or 12. And you know what, I have to tell you, I have such admiration for my peers, and it's been the greatest gift to be able to learn from all of them while we teach. And so there's gotta be a way to figure out how we do this better across all diseases. Because I have to be honest with you, I do believe Alzheimer's and some of these other diseases are going to struggle with exactly what we've struggled with. Now, all of a sudden, maybe you get some traction, and now where does your data go? You're going to be in the same, quagmire that we are right now. So why don't we find a way to fix this?
So we have 5 minutes left.
Can I add two wishes? Can I add?
Oh my gosh, the wishes are flowing. Yes, please.
Well,
there you go.
Okay,
You
wait,
need
I
it.
get the one back too.
Yeah,
Great.
it doesn't work without
I am going shopping, but I mean, the other thing that I'm so struck by, I kind of feel like I was where I was 28 years ago when I did my first startup on telehealth. And we built things that worked and delivered quality of care and a great improvement for both physicians and for the patients. And it's taken almost 30 years to start to move towards a business model for payment reform where the results could justify the cost as opposed to treating a digital counter as a sort of moral equivalent of a physical encounter and billing for each one. And I kind of feel like that's where we're going to be with precision medicine. I have no doubt that we're going to, through our program and other partnerships at NIH, we're going to accelerate the science and the breakthroughs, but is it going to land on fertile ground in two ways? One, is there a workforce ready for the scale of precision health and everything from teaching primary care to not having enough genetics counselors? People keep asking me why we're not doing whole genome sequencing immediately. Is it the cost of the sequencing? And I'm like, well, yes, but it's the cost of the responsible return of information to participants. And there is not enough genetic counseling capacity for our partners who are already doing this in their hospitals and clinics, let alone now adding 1 million new people that need research. So we got to get the workforce ready and skate to where the puck is going. And the other is the business models. I talked to the CXOs of major medical device companies, major pharma companies, hospitals, and insurance companies, and they all admit that they don't quite know what their business model is going to be 10, 15 years out when precision health scales. I mean, Andy Grove used to yell at me at Intel and say, we've got to research the business models as much as we research the basic science. So my plea to this group is start researching the business models and the workforce implications. Otherwise, we're going to mint lots of great PhDs and create lots of papers as we accelerate this science, but we're not going to save a bunch of people's lives very quickly.
So what's your North Star as you approach the next year of work?
Launch. I mean, do our workshop and launch and start learning from people at scale. We've learned fantastic things from the 10,000 people who are coming through right now, but then my request, this is a hard thing to do politically, but Silicon Valley knows we're going to make some mistakes and we're going to fail at parts of it. And my God, I hope Congress and everybody else doesn't throw the baby out with the bathwater and they let us learn from those mistakes, because we're trying some audacious things and we're going to screw it up. And now let us learn from those iterations and keep going. So this room needs to help preach that more broadly in the whole innovation space.
What's your North Star?
Find, do I need this?
I don't know. I think she can have her one back.
Find that intelligent value for individuals to share their data. Really, I think it's going to be a different thing for different people, and it's going to be a really complex undertaking, but I think it's important.
Can I have my wand back?
Take your wand. It's powerful.
Yeah, it is powerful. Seeking out, finding, connecting with those technology firms that are genuinely interested in reaching these targeted demographics and helping us to kind of power the back end of our front end so we have some effectiveness.
I hear there's a few of those around here.
I understand there are.
You might be able to find some.
Maybe.
Mine would be recognizing that in the direct-to-consumer space that there is an element, you do have to be a little bit patient, but everything has early adopters. And so when you look across all these cancers and how we get engaged with this, not everybody is going to trust you right away. There are going to be the early adopters that make their move, follow them, see exactly how they react to the ability to give their data, get their data back, find out what entices them, and then trying to find the best way to bring everybody in to engage. Because the more you can develop critical mass of data, the more questions we'll be able to answer for these patients. And it's like Eric and I were talking, when you sit and watch all of this and the challenges that these patients have, with some of these hugely fatal diseases. In myeloma, it was like that when I was diagnosed. People only live 3 years. Now we have 10 drugs. We've seen it can work. But your heart breaks knowing that pancreatic and glioblastoma and all these other diseases are in the same place, and you want to be helpful, and we need to be helpful across the board. I think you should be at a certain age, by the way, to actually feel like this, because you finally say, okay, at this point, there's got to be a better way to help more people as we possibly can.
Well, we talked about having old dogs being taught new tricks, and I would say that we're I don't know, middle-aged dogs. I'm not ready to take the old moniker. I appreciate you all teaching me new tricks on this panel. And for me, leaving Faster Cures was a big leap to go work at Deloitte. And I've had a great time being able to kind of look at the ecosystem approaches that all of you are working in, as well as the whole consumer marketplace. I think there's a lot of potential and promise here. I think, let's end on the point that you just raised, Kathy, which is let's not keep reinventing the wheel. Let's take the risk and ask people, are you doing this? Can I learn from you? I think the thing that you've modeled, Mike's modeled it, many of us have been, sort of in this for a while, is you take that call, you do that learning, you give, what you know, and you want others to learn from that. So I encourage all of you to do that through the rest of the day. Please stick around. There's amazing panels throughout the day. Go participate actively, be out there on social media, and look to these folks for more insights along the way. I think you've probably heard just enough to whet all of your appetites, but I think there's more than enough for you to do with them going forward. So thank all of you for being here. It's been my honor and pleasure to be back. Thank you.